Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. White House defends U.S. attack on boat from Venezuela as lawful, as White House defends a U.S. admiral's decision to conduct multiple strikes on an alleged Venezuelan drug smuggling vessel starting from September, saying that he had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's authorization. As Russia-Ukraine peace talks gains momentum, U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow soon. Canada's Scotiabank has reported stronger than expected Q4 results with adjusted EPS of 1.93 Canadian dollars, beating estimates of 1.84 Canadian dollar. Driven by capital markets and wealth management revenue, the bank also recorded a restructuring charge linked to layoffs in Canada and Asia. Starbucks will pay $38.9 million to settle New York City probe over worker schedules. This comes as the coffee chain violated a local law requiring fast food businesses to give workers predictable and stable schedules, more than 500,000 times over a 3-year period. Former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez has been released from a U.S. prison, where he was serving a 45-year sentence for drug trafficking and firearms offenses, after receiving a presidential pardon from U.S. President Donald Trump. White House has said that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has approved the second strikes on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat, but also clarifies that he did not issue order to kill everyone on board. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear a New Jersey case on whether first-choice women's resource centers can block a subpoena. The ruling could have nationwide impact on how states regulate anti-abortion facilities that seek to steer women away from terminating pregnancies. Now, starting from U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are in Moscow to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin for talks on a possible end to the war in Ukraine. Trump has pushed for peace in Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II, but earlier meetings with Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have yet to yield results. However, the leaked U.S. draft proposals raise concerns in Kyiv and Europe for favoring Moscow, including limits on Ukraine's army and Russian control of occupied territories. Putin says talks are not a formal agreement, but could form a basis for future accords, while Ukraine insists all diplomatic efforts must guarantee its security. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest, Romania. Thank you very much, Alison, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do you think, how close are we to a ceasefire deal between Ukraine and Russia?
To be honest, I think we're some way off because the sides are so far apart. Putin would like his maximalist demands, which includes seizing territory, which it has not occupied. It wants a cap on Ukraine's military, and it wants a share of the mineral resources there. It wants a veto on Ukraine not joining NATO. Now, Ukraine understandably doesn't think this is fair at all, and European leaders and NATO leaders, with the exception of the United States, are also very opposed to this. They are also worried about Russia's ongoing hybrid war in Europe. So I really cannot see that we are close to a peace deal, even though Donald Trump would like this. And but we are seeing a flurry of meetings. Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner is in Moscow. But what happens there doesn't mean it will translate on the ground into peace. it will just cement what Vladimir Putin says, and Witkoff will probably agree to a large extent. He's proved to be favorable to the Kremlin, to Putin. But that doesn't mean it will work out with Ukraine, because you need basically peace between Ukraine and Russia. And the US can play a role, and they can put on pressure, and they are putting on pressure, but it doesn't mean it will translate into a peace deal or even a ceasefire.
Yes, 100%. How do you think what political risks could arise for Ukraine if draft proposals are still perceived as favoring Moscow in any future agreement? And who do you think who could guarantee Ukraine's security?
I think Ukraine, because it's the smaller partner here, Russia is a massive nation, at least geographically, perhaps not in the size of its economy, but it does have a strong military and it's a nuclear power. So Ukraine is at a disadvantage in this sense, that even though it has valiantly fought back against Russian attacks and has done incredibly well in doing so, it is not the senior partner. It's not even an equal partner with Russia at the negotiating table. Also, the United States does generally seem to be siding with Russia, although Donald Trump does do flip-flops. Europe is getting its act together. So the question, who could guarantee peace there, or some sort of ceasefire, and who is interested? And it would seem to me to be, I don't know, Europe perhaps could play a key role there, and possibly the UN. But we haven't even got round to these details because we're not quite clear on what both sides will agree on. It's clear that Ukraine will probably have to make some territorial concessions, but it certainly doesn't want to make concessions to territories that Russia has failed to occupy. And it doesn't want to cap on the size of its military, or it doesn't want to veto or a ban on it joining NATO. So there are all these questions, and then, these are very bitter hostilities. They would need to be international boots on the ground. Europe does have an interest. I don't think the US does. They are already pulling out of, or they've announced they're pulling, or they're reducing their troops in Europe. Perhaps the UN, that's possible. I don't know if India would want to play a role, other countries want to play a role, China even. It's unclear. I don't think we've got to that stage at the moment, but I think these issues are being discussed behind the scenes.
Yes, 100%. Thank you very much, Alison, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, we stay on this topic. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has hailed what his commanders described as the full capture of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine, calling it a key victory in Moscow's nearly 4-year war. But the Ukrainian military says it still controls the northern part of the city and is actively attacking Russian positions in the south. However, the Ukraine's general staff denies Russia's claims that Pokrovsk is captured. The control of Pokrovsk would give Russia a platform to push north towards Kramatorsk and Slovyansk and strengthen its hold over the wider Donbas region. Analysts say Moscow may also use the gain to boost its leverage in upcoming peace talks, though Ukraine insists it will not concede its territory. Now we welcome back Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us. Now, what are we to make of conflicting claims over Pokrovsk?
Well, Russia has every interest at this time of diplomatic talks with Witkoff and Kushner in Moscow to say it has conquered, it has occupied this key logistics hub, to say, look, we're winning the war. We've captured this key logistics hub. Therefore, our demands are reasonable. But it's just what Moscow is saying. There's no independent media verifying it. Ukraine is denying it. It's clear Moscow has been upping the hostilities on that area and has been fighting a lot. But it's also equally clear that Ukraine has been repelling Russian forces and fighting back very valiantly. I suspect that Russia is making a huge effort, but I actually doubt they have conquered it. They have occupied that area. They just want the United States and their negotiators to believe that they have occupied this key hub, but I don't think they have. And until we have independent verification, I think they've made some gains probably, but I think they're quite far from a total victory, which they are claiming at the moment. But they have political interest and diplomatic interest in overstating their claims.
Right, and how do you think in particular Russia claiming capture of Pokrovsk influences its leverage in upcoming peace negotiations with US?
Well, it wants to show the US, and Russia has performed quite abysmally on the battleground. They thought they would take Ukraine in 3 days or 4 days or something like that, and here we are almost 4 years. They've sacrificed a lot of troops. They've had to bring in foreign troops, North Korean troops. They have captured some land, but it's with a huge cost, both in terms of human lives, but also in terms of military and financial costs. They've performed pretty poorly. So they need to come to the table, the diplomatic negotiating table, with a claim of some success. And we're not military officers, but this Pokrovsk is a key logistics hub. And should they take control of it, which I don't think they have, but they claim they have, then they can come to Witkoff and Jared Kushner and say, look, we've captured this. We are winning the war. We have the upper hand. And I don't think they do, but they're making a huge effort. And they need to show the US, or pretend to the US, that they have claimed, occupied more land than they actually have, to give themselves a diplomatic advantage. So it's a diplomatic. I think it's a war of words. I think it's a war of Russian narrative rather than Russian military successes we're talking about.
Yes, and Alison, if I remember correctly, yesterday's discussion we mentioned about how this seems to be more of a business deal instead of ceasefire negotiations.
It's about money.
Yes,
It's about money.
Yes. Alison, can you please connect how Trump's envoys include his son-in-law, who is not a politician, and how do you think this affects U.S. credibility and influence in ongoing Ukraine-Russia peace negotiations?
Well, I think US influence and credibility has taken a battering, because it's very clear that very unqualified people are being sent as top negotiators, like Witkoff. I'm sure he's very good in his own field, which is real estate, but he's certainly not. He doesn't know all the details of diplomacy and of Russia and Ukraine. He may know a few more than he did a few months ago, but he's certainly no expert, and nor is Jared Kushner. They represent business interests, money interests. You see that Rubio, who is the state secretary, has been kept out. He has a much better grasp of what's happening on the ground and a much more realistic diplomatic view of it. But he's deliberately kept out because Donald Trump has business interests there, particularly the mineral resources, which he wants to divide with Russia. He sees Russia as the big partner, and as a big partner, he wants to divide the spoils with the United States and claim success in managing to secure a peace deal. So it's more of a business thing than a diplomatic thing, and it is harming or continuing to harm U.S. reputation in the world as a leading global power, and also a serious global power.
100%, I completely agree with you. Thank you very much, Alison, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus to NATO Secretary-General Rutte has highlighted ongoing efforts to support Ukraine and work towards ending the war with a just and lasting peace. He has emphasized that allies are expected to make new contributions to the PURL program aimed at purchasing U.S. arms for Ukraine in the coming days. Rutte has welcomed U.S.-led initiatives to make these efforts a reality and expressed confidence that they could help restore peace in Europe. He has also warned that Russia's attacks against Ukraine remain increasingly brutal. On NATO expansion, Rutte has noted that consensus is required for new members to join, and currently no agreement exists. He has also addressed questions about Senator Rubio's absence at an upcoming NATO meeting, explaining that Rubio's work commitments prevent attendance. Finally, Rutte has said that elements of any deal to end the Ukraine war will be handled separately by NATO. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us. Alison, how do you analyze NATO's support and the remarks made by NATO head on support of Ukraine?
Well, it's very important for Ukraine to have support of the support of NATO, and this is one of the key reasons for the war, because Russia doesn't want Ukraine ever to become a member of NATO. Not that it was ever, but there was no timeline for it. There was just a promise in 2008 at a summit in Bucharest, but there was no timeline for Ukraine joining NATO. This is why it was a pretext for Russia to invade, saying that Ukraine was about to become a member of NATO, and it certainly wasn't. But by the same token, Ukraine doesn't want to be told how it defends itself militarily and what its political choices are. So it will not accept a veto on it ever joining NATO. It wants that possibility left open because it doesn't want to be open again to more Russian aggression. The fact that Rubio isn't attending the talks, I imagine that Donald Trump doesn't want him to attend the talks. Rubio is known to be more favorable to a just solution to the Ukraine-Russia war, and he is at odds with Donald Trump's Witkoff and Kushner, and with J.D. Vance as well. So I think, to a certain extent, Rubio is being sidelined here because to be honest, he's too much of an expert. And I think Donald Trump wants a business deal out of this rather than a proper just police solution.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Ms. Alison Mutler for joining us today and sharing that insight all the way from Bucharest. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus to North America. Venezuela has reauthorized U.S. deportation flights for Venezuelan migrants only days after suspending them in response to President Donald Trump's demand that Venezuelan airspace be classified as closed. The earlier suspension briefly halted the repatriation of Venezuelans being removed from the United States. According to Venezuela's Ministry of Transportation, the U.S. formally requested that flights resume, leading President Nicolas Maduro to approve the reinstatement. The decision marks a temporary stabilization in migration coordination between these two countries despite ongoing political tension. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Washington, D.C. as a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you very much, Raymond, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how are we to see this fluctuating, these tensions between Venezuela as it closed the airspace and then it opened again? And is it only for the deportation flights?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me that this is a piece of the president's approach to Latin America, that he has an authority, that President Trump has the authority really to decide for other sovereign nations who are in what he would view as his sphere of influence, to decide for them what their actions are. And of course, he's moved into the Caribbean, an aircraft carrier and other military assets. He's blowing up boats. And the latest type of pressure on Venezuela was to say the airspace was closed. It seems to me that Maduro has very wisely or craftily decided that the thing which really is ingratiating to President Trump is to do something for him on immigration. Immigration seems to be the fallback issue for President Trump. It's one that excites his base. And so Maduro has said, yes, we'll take back some of these immigrants to the United States. It's really not any skin off Maduro's nose to do so. And in his view, it placates Trump. And evidently, that has worked to some degree. You haven't heard any more about shutting down the airspace. But it is only a temporary measure. The basic problem is the Trump attitude of the 19th century in terms of empire, the reflex action, for the 19th century in regard to Central and South America for the United States was, if there's something wrong, send in the Marines. We got away from that for the past 80 years. We've taken a different approach. Rather than empire, one of cooperation. President Carter, of course, dealing on the return of the Panama Canal to the Panamanians and working in a multilateral way. At this point, that's not the approach of President Trump.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Raymond Vickery for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, we stay on the same topic. A U.S. Navy double-tap strike on a suspected Venezuelan drug boat is drawing intense scrutiny after reports that 2 survivors of the first blast were killed in the second. The White House says the Navy acted within legal authority, but lawmakers from both parties are demanding a full review. More than 80 people have been killed in similar maritime strikes since early September, yet U.S. officials have released little evidence providing drug trafficking activity on the targeted vessels. Congressional committees in both chambers have launched investigations into the legality of the operations and the rules under which commanders are permitted to act. Legal experts warn the second strike could violate international humanitarian law if survivors were incapacitated and no longer a threat. Meanwhile, Venezuela has condemned the attacks, accusing Washington of raising regional tensions. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and also former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Raymond, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, what are we to believe about this ongoing alleged ships, drug-containing ships, and what political consequences could this double-tap strike have for U.S.-Venezuela relations, which already seem to be in shambles?
Well, thanks again for allowing me to comment on this. This approach of blowing boats out of the water and killing people is contrary to any rule of law. You can't have a situation in which the Trump administration acts as a prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner. In order to wage peace, you have to have a strategy, you have to have partners, and you have to operate within principles. None of this is applicable to the President Trump approach to Venezuela and what he is doing. The latest approach is clearly contrary to international law as well as U.S. law. The second strike situation is even more egregious.
Right. Thank you very much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving to our next news, former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez has been released from a U.S. federal prison, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons in U.S. Hernandez has been serving a 45-year sentence on drug trafficking and firearms convictions. His release follows a presidential pardon issued by U.S. President Donald Trump, a decision confirmed publicly by Hernandez's wife, Ana Garcia. She has said that the pardon ends nearly 4 years of what she described as pain, waiting, and difficult trials. The development comes just days after Honduras' presidential election, in which Trump has openly backed conservative National Party candidate Nasri Asfura. The race remains extremely close, with Asfura and Liberal candidate Salvador Nasrallah virtually tied at just under 40% of the vote. Hernandez governed Honduras from 2014 to 2022 and maintained a close partnership with Washington. He was arrested soon after leaving the office and has repeatedly claimed he was wrongfully convicted. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Raymond Vickery. Thank you very much, Raymond, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how might this particular individual and former leader, Hernandez's pardon, influence political dynamics and voter possession in Honduras following this upcoming presidential election? Also looking at the timing of this, can this be seen as U.S. interrupting for an election?
Well, thanks very much again for letting me comment on this.
Thank you.
This pardon of Hernandez, the former president who was sentenced to 45 years for narcotics smuggling and a U.S. court of law, shows what a shambles the Trump approach to Latin America is. On the one hand, President Trump is authorizing the blowing of boats out of the water, the killing of people without any kind of due process of the law. And yet, when we do have due process for a former president of Honduras who has been sentenced to 45 years in prison, you're going to let him go. And why is this? This is really to cement his relationship, President Trump's relationship with his chosen candidate, Asfura, to be president of Honduras. And it's all a part of the empire building approach that the Trump administration has. I think the pardoning of Hernandez really does not help in terms of the candidacy of Asfura because Hernandez is widely reviled in Honduras as well as having been convicted in the United States. So the election results are still unclear, but it is very disconcerting that you have really a hypocritical approach to the question of smuggling. You let one guy go because it might help you with your relations in influencing Honduras, and yet at the other end you say, well, I'm authorized to have people killed when it comes to Venezuela and Colombia. The only constant in this is this mistaken throwback to empire building, which the United States has gotten away from and has largely kept peace and prosperity going in the Western Hemisphere ever since World War II. And now that policy of a cooperative approach is out the window with President Trump, and this latest pardon and the interference in the election in Honduras shows that. You know, it wasn't very long ago that universally it was considered to be inappropriate for the United States to interfere in elections abroad. And that was the same in regard to other countries interfering in elections internationally. But that approach has been jettisoned in favor of a throwback to the 19th century view of empire.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing that, and so also shedding light on the history. As always, great learning from you, Mr. Raymond Vickery. Thank you for joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. Now we move on and we stay in the region. Luigi Mangione, who was accused of fatally shooting United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last December, appeared in court on Monday as his defense moves to block key evidence. The 27-year-old accused has pleaded not guilty to state and federal murder charges, which carry the death penalty. Lawyers argue that a handgun, notebook, and his statements should be excluded, claiming improper search and questioning before his rights were read. Prosecutors have said the 9mm handgun matches the weapon used, and notebook writings outline a motive. Additional evidence includes DNA fingerprints and CCTV from the crime scene and his arrest in Pennsylvania. Witnesses have testified, including police officials, a McDonald's employee, and a jail officer who described Mangione as calm and logical. The defense is also pushing to block the federal death penalty, citing comments by senior officials that could prejudge the case. No trial date has been set as of now. And that's a wrap on America 360. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.